I don't want to waste further time, and therefore let's directly continue with our second speaker. It's Deborah. Welcome, Debora Stickler. So Deborah studied mathematics and is currently a lecturer at the JOANNEUM University of Applied Sciences in Graz at the Institute of Business Informatics and Data Science. And currently, she's also studying psychology. And how these two things fit together, she will talk about right now by giving some examples about perceptual phenomena in psychology discussed in the context of data science. So welcome, Deborah, and stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, thanks for having me today. My talk is called Perspective is Everything, a deeper look into skewed data. And what I want to talk about today is how we can get to know our own biases to maybe be better data scientists. So you maybe know model implementation nowadays can be somewhat easy sometimes. We have data robot, we just throw in our data, they give us a model and we evaluate it. But what no one evaluates for us is actually the data, and it's our job. And that's kind of what I want to investigate with you today. So, tennis is the healthiest sport. I'm a big gym rat, I love to go to the gym, and right next to my gym is a photo in a squash hall which says, "Squash, the healthiest sport." And they also have a table with numbers indicating that this must be true. So I was, of course, immediately intrigued, researched this thoroughly. And what I found was not information on squash, but actually on tennis. So the homepage Tennis CT claims tennis increases life expectancy. It is official. Tennis really is the healthiest sport, so that had me going. Next, also, the New York Times claimed the best sport for longer life, try tennis. And when you think that is not enough, because one is a newspaper, one is a tennis homepage, of course, to promote it, also Health Digest said, science says this is the best sport for increasing life expectancy. And there I was, almost ready to swap going to the gym, lifting weights, and go right into tennis. Well, let's look at it a bit closer. First, I wanted to find the original source for this squash is the healthiest sports, and it is actually a study in 2010 conducted by Forbes magazine. And what they did is they considered 4 different physiological components of fitness, like cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, and then they also included injury risk and generally energy expenditure, meaning like how much calories do you burn when you make the sports. And what they did is they basically they measured the health specs of professionals, and they also did interviews with coaches, people who work in the gym. And then you rated all these categories from 1 to 5, 5 being the best one, so you wanted the highest score, and 1 being the lowest. And they came up with squash being first. And maybe some of you are also into sports, and then you might realize this is kind of a strange table because rowing is number 2, and anyone who knows a little bit about rowing, they actually lift weights all year, and then they row for a month because it's super hard on the body, and you actually get super, you're very injury prone to do these sports. And this study was also refuted, not really to be super believable by experts. So, where do the other studies come from? Well, in 2018, a super interesting study was conducted. It is called Various Leisure Time Physical Activities Associated with Wildly Divergent Life Expectancies, the Copenhagen City Heart study. That study was conducted over 25 years, so from 1991 to 2017, and it considered 8,577 healthy males and females. And what they came up with is mind-blowing. They stated tennis increases your life expectancy by almost 10 years, which is way more than all the other sports. I'm sorry, I don't know why this is cropped. So badminton is number 2, and then there should be soccer, cycling, etc., which also increase the life expectancy. This is pretty surprising and should convince all of you to swap immediately what you're doing to work out, because tennis gets you 10 years longer in your life. I looked into the study because I, at this point, was pretty suspicious that there must be something going on. And what I found is a good example. So this is a perfect example for the base rate fallacy, which says this is the tendency to ignore relevant statistical information in favor of information that we are interested in, case-specific information, in our case, sports. So when you look at the table, they, how they did the study, they basically interviewed people in the beginning of the study period. They measured them, their doctors, they're evaluating them, their mental health, and all their socioeconomic background. And they did the same thing at the end of the study. And it, I think, maintained above 5,000 people, which worked out through these 25 years and were then considered people which they could include in the study. And what you can see on this table pretty prominently is the following. You have in the sector of education, almost 50% of people in tennis have a university degree. That is not true for any other category. And the second thing, which is closely related to it, and we know there's many studies in psychology, that the household income for people with university degrees also, I think, comes to no surprise, is higher for people than people with no university degree. Of course, this is like a catch-22, like one leads to the other. And what that leads to is also something which we know from other studies, completely unrelated to sports. The higher your income, the better medical services you can afford, the people are healthier. So basically what is shown is just the better your socioeconomic background, the better your health can be. Has nothing to do with tennis. Is though a study, you still will find it. It's common news and is something you will find all the time. So also referencing my colleague with fake news, this is a scientific study which still is valid. I recommend you reading it. They have many arguments why racket sport goes so high, but not a single time do they at all talk about the influence of socioeconomic background in their results. So base rate fallacy is something we can encounter, that we get so focused on what we want to show that we completely omit the larger picture. In that case, where do the people live? What does their life look like apart from playing sports? Okay, so that was my first example. You see here on this slide two images. On the right-hand side you see a Monet, and on the left-hand side you see a Rembrandt painting. And I would like to know, like, just raise your hands if you find the right-hand side picture more visually appealing than Monet. Just a quick raising of the hands. Thank you. And now the other ones who find the Rembrandt more visually appealing. Thank you. Good. And I have a second one. We have 3 salads, which are a little bit different, but also not so much. So you imagine you're at the salad buffet and you decide which salad you choose. Who of you would choose the first salad? Please raise your hand. Yes. Who would choose the second one? So first row, second one. Yeah. And who would choose the last one? Okay, no one. Yeah, it was too expected. So what we can see here, I'm also referencing what my colleague talked about, now coming a little bit from psychology perspective. So in our human visual perception, how we perceive things, we're highly attracted to high contrast. That's something we really like. And that is true for many things. So why did I show you the salads? In the 2019 study, they could show that we prefer salads with high contrasting colors, contrast between red and greens being especially attractive to us. So people would be, and we also saw it here in your hand raising, we are more drawn to salads which have a high contrast than just a green salad, just overall. Why did I talk about the paintings? Well, also there was a slight higher liking in the impressionistic painting versus the Rembrandt. That is similar. So both painters work with high contrast, just that Rembrandt works with dark to light, so he starts on a black canvas and goes to lighter. And Monet works in contrast with color, so he has purples next to greens. And it's just something which is very visually pleasing. And why do I talk about this? Of course, we have a bias. It's not at all that we all perceive things in our own way. Also, what the colleague already said, we have a bias towards things we find attractive just by the way our eyes are built, how our perception works, and that is towards things with higher contrast. And there's multitude of studies also, for example, that males apparently prefer females wearing red shirts over a gray shirt, even though same person, just the color of the shirts making an impression how you are perceived. And also my colleague talked about it, just here's some color schemes which you can use in presentations and which are used in marketing to draw you in and to evoke a certain message in things that you like. So you see, for example, red has passion, love, excitement, urgency. Urgency being, for example, a stop sign, but also something romantic, tempting. And green stands for growth, harmony, balance, nature, something more grounding. And then when you think about black, it says elegant sophistication. Think about black countertops, like rooms where they make everything black car, maybe shiny black car, but also power and authority, like you wear a black suit to assert dominance in a room. These things are all used, and they can also lead to biased algorithms if your data is biased because you select them based on your attractiveness bias that you are maybe not even aware of. Like you don't even know maybe that you have this inkling. And as soon as you have biased data in your algorithm, as you'll know, the results are not applicable to everyone. They already have their bias. I also recommend you here, so this picture I took out of a publication from Springer about human-computer interaction. It's actually a female research team which focuses highly on exactly this loop of how perceived attractiveness can lead to stereotypes-based algorithms, and it feeds back into the loop. Okay, so we walked from things that are out of our control, right? The data that is biased, we perceive it, we maybe are locked into. Now we know ourselves better, how we look into the world and how we maybe judge others based on our attractiveness bias. Now we come to the last one. I also have a corona example, a bit different than my colleague, and that is not fake news, that actually happened. So Trump suggested injection of disinfectant to beat coronavirus and clean the lungs. Maybe some of you remember this happening. This happened. And you might wonder, why did he do such a thing? Is he ludicrous? And there is actually an effect or a phenomenon called Dunning-Kruger effect that I want to show you. And this effect proposes that individuals with lower abilities in a subject tend to rate themselves higher in their qualifications. So meaning Trump, which has no knowledge in medicine, thinking he can give medical advice, is a good example of something. You see here a graph which indicates exactly this. On the y-axis we have the confidence rating, on the x-axis the competence rating, and we see when you have just a slight competence, your confidence rating skyrockets and then goes down. And it's a pretty interesting example. Not just armchair psychology, which I'll show you in the next slide. Just want to say this graph is very overdone. If you read the original publication from Dunning and Kruger 1999, it doesn't look as exaggerated. But what they did in 2021, and that relates now to us as data scientists, they, in Poland, went into 2 different software development companies and asked the software developments to rate their skills. Software developers of different skill levels, so junior, intermediate, and seniors. And then they led them to tasks. And what we could find is exactly the Dunning-Kruger effect, that people with lower programming skills related to more over-optimistic estimates of their own performance, stating people thought, I'm very good at it, this is easy, showed actually less good performance. And this also, I want to say, is a similar effect in the opposite direction, which was proposed in the 2000s, that also people which are highly skilled tend to rate themselves lower. And that is something maybe for all of us to consider when we apply for jobs, when we work and have someone telling us what to do, that sometimes maybe also a skill level validates our feeling of this is actually really hard and someone else not seeing what's happening. And why do we answer like that? That we can call the social desirability bias, because in the end of the day, we all just want to be really liked by the others, and that, of course, influences how we respond to things. And with that, I just want to summarize, there is so many ways which are maybe very different of a survivorship bias, of like the biases which are very known in statistics, which we still influence and bias the data, maybe even bias towards ourselves. And I hope with this knowledge you can maybe better assess the data in the beginning and also assess situations and be confident in your own data. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Yeah, maybe first question from my side. Have you used any further attractive biases in your presentations to maybe manipulate or guide us?
Yeah, I used orange tables because orange is for excitement, and I hope that excites a little bit. So that I did actually. And then also, I think maybe don't know, but it's called serife. I don't know in English if it's also the same, like letters which have like a little bit of surroundings around them. People tend to have a hard time reading that on presentations, so I removed all of them on presentations as well to keep your attention. Serife, I don't know, it's like Times New Roman font, for example, has the serife, the T's, which have these things around them, have a very hard time reading. I removed all of it to keep your attention.
I think it worked. Thanks for that. Okay, any questions online yet? Okay. It always takes some time until they are typing their questions into the chat. In the room, who wants to start with the first question? Oh, second, after mine.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Ethna Knappich, Fachhochschule Kärnten. So I come from an intercultural communication background, and we've been talking about biases for so many years in terms of communication science, and they were almost dead until AI sort of popped up with all these biases that we're talking about. We know there's around 300 cognitive biases. So, and here you've presented some very interesting ones. The problem with biases is we're constantly reproducing them. So if you were to identify, you know, how we could even focus on which biases maybe are most interesting, here you've identified some. Are there any others that you would also add?
Yeah, so I didn't present on purpose because I thought, because it's an audience of data science, it's of course something like a survivorship bias. We just look at the people who survived an accident to estimate is a big one, of course. Also selection bias, how do we select our data? So these big ones I think are definitely very prominent. I wanted to focus on some maybe not as popular ones just for that reason, so you get maybe more knowledge about yourself which affect you directly rather than a selection. But yeah, definitely, I think there's also like it's in marketing, how you present different options, a decoy option for us to be biased to spend more money on things, like all of those I think are very interesting and should be considered.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I think now online or from you, Lukas? Okay,
thank you.
From Anita and then online.
So thank you very much for this interesting talk. I was also very astonished by the Copenhagen City Heart study problem, because I did a lot of research together with this group, and we did HDL cholesterol levels because they have thousands of samples that are very well genotyped. So do you have an explanation why this was missed? Because this is so obvious that...
I actually don't know either, to be honest. It seems that it was really a blind spot, that they were so focused on their one thing, they just completely omitted, because as you say, it's a really well done study and the sampling is very variant. Yes. So we have so many different peoples with such a huge sample. Like, I was also surprised, but yeah.
So as a mathematician, what kind of model would you recommend for instances like this?
I don't think I would change the model. I think that it's simple regressions and so on. So it's not a mathematical problem. You just need to make sure to include this socioeconomic background into your calculations, which they did not do at all. So it would, for example, be interesting to split up the analysis first in the different socioeconomic background and see if there's differences, right? Because we just put them all together.
And I think another important aspect here would also be replication.
Yes.
So this was when we cooperated with Copenhagen City Heart.
Yeah.
We had findings in our study population from Munich, and they were highly significant. So what we do is we try to find the same finding in other large study populations to see if it's true, because sometimes it's only an effect that can be seen in one population, no matter the size. So 8,000 sounds impressive. Still, there can be wrong conclusions. So the key to finding real associations is replication. If the Copenhagen City Heart study probably asked another study to do exactly the same analysis, they would have probably seen, well, it's gone, it's fake, it's vanished.
The same paper, though, analyzed also golfing, and they came to the same conclusion, that golfing increases your life expectancy. I was like, how is this possible? I could do this twice?
We've got not a question, but a comment from our online community for Deborah. You're doing great. Thanks for the interesting talk from Sophia.
Thanks.
Thanks for this refresher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adriana Zer, Geoinformatics, FH Kärnten. You mentioned around 300 cognitive biases. In those, which ones would you maybe rank as the top ones that affect our visual perception, that are probably the most deceiving ones? Because we, of course, look at the data, analyze it, but then we need to communicate the results of our analysis. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, as the other person asked, I think really this attractiveness bias, in my opinion, is one of the largest one, because we always assume, and it's also a saying, right, like beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, and I really think we should be very aware that this is not true at all. And this attractiveness bias actually also translates into how we interact with people. There's a multitude of studies, even if you don't want to see it, which suggest we treat people nicer if we find them attractive, etc., etc. So that is something I think should be first and foremost investigated in this example. These 300 cognitive biases go over collection of the data, asking wrong questions, also making wrong conclusions, as we saw in the heart study. So there's, I guess, depending on the question you ask, different ones I would rank highly. I think just with the attractiveness, I thought it was interesting because I was very blind to it until I was confronted with the data, and I was surprised how impactful it is in our lives.
Okay, any further questions? Online? Comments? We just read the positive ones, but I'm sure there are just positive ones online. Okay, then I have a last question. You talked also about this Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
Do you have any numbers? Who is more affected by this one, male or female?
No, I don't have any numbers by it, but I thought about, there is numbers though, that females undersell themselves when they do job interviews, and men tend to oversell themselves. And I just thought it was an important message just to deliver the Dunning-Kruger effect, that actually this overselling could also be just a, a wrong or like a confidence into skills which you maybe don't understand what's standing behind it, and that you shouldn't be shy, or that you shouldn't shy away also as a female going into this field to stand your ground. And if you think something is hard because you have the factual knowledge, to stand there and make sure to deliver this message.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for that. Okay, thank you again, Deborah.